And a very good morning to you. Welcome along to OTB AM this Tuesday morning after the bank holiday weekend. Hope you're alive and well and doing okay, and that you haven't left an important part of your brain somewhere in a field out there over the weekend. If you did, you're also welcome along. Yeah, we'll leave that one there for now. You can leave a comment for us under any of our live streams this morning. You can get in touch with us on Twitter at Off The Ball or at Off The Ball AM if that is your preferred option. Owen, how are you?
Very well. How are you?
I'm well. It was a pretty interesting weekend, a tragic weekend, an exhilarating weekend, depending on what sports story you were covering.
Yeah, I think crazy probably covers all those bases, doesn't it? As you say, from the tragedy to some of the incredible things we saw as well on the pitch, kind of everything put it into a small bit of perspective. I think it was kind of summed up watching Match of the Day on Saturday night, where it was just a very surreal viewing experience. Clearly a very affected Gary Lineker trying to pare through what had actually happened a couple of hours previously, while details were still emerging of what had actually happened outside the King Power Stadium, and then 20 minutes later getting stuck into football analysis in a kind of half-hearted way, which you can't really blame them for. So yeah, as you say, really weird weekend, probably one of the weirdest sports weekends that I've ever seen. Yeah,
loads of GAA stories as well that we're going to cover. Paul Mannion was in spectacular form on one leg in the Dublin County final, but as well as that, the Wicklow champions had to play 2 days in a row. They win the Wicklow County title, and then the next day they're straight out into Leinster. It's like the bad old days. It's almost as if the bad old days never happened.
That's true. Michael Verney's got the line in the Irish Independent this morning that it was 20 weeks since Wicklow got knocked out of the Inter-County Championship before the weekend, before the county final was played. It was obviously a replay on Saturday. So they'd given themselves a 1 week window to make sure they got it all run off. But,
we've got a week, what could go wrong?
And sure enough, they had the cheek to draw their first county final, and a replay was needed. And they were at the weekend and then had to go and play road 24 hours later. The manager of St. Pat's kind of admirably saying, well, I'm not going to stop the lads having a few pints afterwards. Like, it's a weird balance between celebrating what was one of the greatest moments for a lot of those players on a GAA pitch, and then having to actually knuckle down and get stuck into Leinster again, because part of the glory of winning your club championship is going on the journey.
And getting to play in Leinster.
Yes, and that whole thing is cheapened. Like the idea that, at least they got to celebrate that and they didn't get the extra reward of getting to play in Leinster isn't a great idea to kind of base yourself on, because like we've seen this before. There was some thought that the movement of All-Ireland finals would change things, but clearly the J1ers have messed everything up, because nobody is willing to play any meaningful county championship games during the summer.
Are we blaming the students? Literally, that's it.
Like tongue-in-cheek.
But I think that was one of the main reasons why everybody was saying, oh, they don't want to play with their best players away on holidays. It's like, well, okay. I mean, what do you do here?
I think you got to play the games in the summer.
And say, if you want to stick around, stick around. If you don't. Like, but then you're draining the life of some of these rural clubs who are completely sustained by the students.
Well, the thing is, one of the arguments for moving the All-Irelands forward was that you would get more summer games for club players. Because
and now you stick them on and they don't want them.
Well, that's the thing. The argument was that, okay, you get your club games eventually, but you've got a long break in the middle of the year between your county league and your club championship, whenever that starts up in August or September. But also you're playing in crappy pitches in the middle of winter all the time. At least gives them a couple of games in the summer, but it clearly hasn't happened to that point. And, we've said this time and time again, but there is one very easy solution to this, and it's let one body have control of all the fixtures. And, you then have to get your own house in order in terms of fulfilling your own fixtures, with perhaps a couple of weeks of wiggle room for celebrations and for replays before you go into All-Ireland Club Championships or Provincial Club Championships. But that top-down approach seems like a dystopian future, given some of the things we've seen.
Well, so you would say a central organisation in Croke Park issues the fixtures for every county?
Well, yeah, or like say to them at the outset of the year, you better play your games in the summer, because otherwise you've got a fixture on whatever the date may be in October or November. And like that seems to be the way it was with this situation where Leinster had handed down a fixture. Maybe they're trying to make a point. Maybe they're trying to make a point to the counties within their province to say, listen, next year you got to get your act together a bit quicker. You've got to play your games in the summer. Who cares if people are on J1s? I guess one year you might have 4 or 5 lads who are gone on J1s, and your opponent might only have one. But the wheel always turns, and in a couple of years it might be the other way. It's just a luck of the draw. I can't really see any middle ground here.
The look of the draw suggests that some clubs would have to be happy with a defeat, and they would have to just accept their lot.
Well, yeah,
almost like they were given a suspension and they had to accept it. Imagine accepting a suspension.
Well, that would be a disgraceful thing to do.
It would, wouldn't it? It's like if you're not cheating, you're not trying.
Punishments are not there to be served, Jared. They're there to be railed against, and it's a show of adversity. You don't have the hunger and the desire to exist in the GAA unless you're willing to appeal the suspension.
It's fair enough, really, isn't it?
I think so. If I was suspended for my job here for any reason, I would definitely appeal it, and successfully so. I dare say. I've learned a lot.
Yeah. The disciplinary procedures are a bit more rigorous here than they would be in the GAA world, though, so just keep an eye on that one on. We're going to speak with Gary Breen a little bit later on about the weekend's Premier League football. Interesting stuff last night in the Man City Spurs game, where everybody lost their shit because the pitch markings from the NFL game at the weekend were still there. It's like the most talked about thing in English football this morning. Like, it is a plague, a virus has swept through English football, called American football, and pitch markings in particular, because it said London on the side of one of them. It's like, oh my God, I can't believe it says London on a pitch.
It's almost as if the hallowed turf of Wembley has made people more angry about this than they really should be. Not kind of withstanding the idea that I'm pretty sure I was watching one of the Dolphins games earlier on in the season, and there was soccer pitch markings on their NFL pitch. So if there's an argument out there that the NFL wouldn't let it happen to them, that the Americans are brash and bold and allow it to happen on our pitches over at this side of the Atlantic, well, it wouldn't happen the other way around. But I'm not so sure about that. Granted, the nuance is that Miami actually have their own soccer team, and this wasn't actually a London-based team who ruined the pitch.
Also, more importantly, right, like the whole situation in Wicklow is Wicklow's fault. The whole situation with the pitch is Spurs' fault. It's Spurs' fault and Spurs builders' fault.
Yeah.
And that's it. Sometimes you get builders in, and sometimes they tell you, oh, I'll have that finished for you next week. And 6 months later, they're still there.
Paid by the hour?
And that's what happens. Builders lie to you about how long it's going to take to build shit. That's what happens. And that's what has happened. Spurs have got diddled by the builders who are like, you know, or maybe Spurs aren't organised properly enough. Who knows? Either way, this has nothing to do with football being annexed by American football or anything like that. It's not a symbol of the grasping capitalism of the Premier League. It's not. It's not a symbol of the grasping capitalism of Wembley or the FA or anybody or anything. It's just this project took a little bit longer than we anticipated. The NFL had booking in the stadium, which is their right, which is the stadium's right. Spurs are squatting at that stadium for a period of time, and the pitch markings couldn't come off in one day. And that's it.
Yeah,
that's the only story.
Was it the most pronounced after-day pitch markings you've ever seen? Or was it just spoken about so much that they seemed more and more clear? It was kind of that thing that you're supposed to ignore, and then you're like, actually, that hasn't played any havoc really on my viewing experience, but it was mentioned so much that all I could see was that big NFL crest ruining everything.
I would like to read one piece that doesn't mention the pitch markings.
It's a key part. It was actually quite convenient having the pitch markings, because after a while you could see that the 10-metre line was like the 15 yards out, and so say if there was no screamer, of course, in last night's game there was one tap-in, but if there was a screamer, there was no grey area about, was it 30 yards out, was it 25 yards out? It's like the pitch markings are there, just add another 5 yards onto it and you've got your exact yardage right there. So quite convenient in that manner, I must say. The idea as well, though, that the pitch was like I didn't see the NFL game on Sunday, but they must have been running the ball with every single play, given how much they tore it up.
Was it that bad? Yeah,
it was pretty bad, and there was like some mention in commentary that there was a bobble before that big Eric Lamela chance near the end. I don't quite think it was that bad. Somehow it was fine. It was quite ragged, I think, is what you would say. And the pitch markings, you know, I'm sure when you were down on the pitch, they made very little material impact on how you actually approached the game. There
were a lot of like very big fat guys leaning for the whole game. The line of scrimmage is obviously always going to be a bit screwed up, but it's also it's weird how small the NFL pitch is, isn't it? Like it's really skinny. Yeah. I didn't realise it was quite so skinny.
Well, that's true. Like, your proximity from one wide receiver to the other is actually a lot smaller than your two wingers in soccer. And I would have actually thought that it might have been the opposite, given that you've got such a mass of bodies lining up right in the middle of the park. I would have thought that it was actually wider than a soccer pitch, but obviously not the case. Another thing we learned yesterday, while I say it didn't probably have an overly material effect on the outcome of the game, which it didn't, it was still probably the worst condition we've ever seen a Premier League ground in. Certainly in the last 10-15 years, which is remarkable given it's Wembley.
Yeah, it was kind of a throwback to the good old days. So here's what's coming up on the show across the rest of this morning all the way until 9:30. Alan Quinlan is going to join us just around about 9 o'clock to talk through the weekend's rugby, which is really a preview, I guess, of next weekend, the start of the November Internationals proper. A plane full of Irish rugby players has flown off to Chicago to take on the Italians. Some very, very famous names on that plane, which was a bit surprising. Certain key players who you would expect will be starting against the All Blacks. And that might mean that they're being given the week off against Argentina as well, so they won't play this week and they won't play against Argentina and they're straight back in. I don't know. I'm sure that the air miles and all that kind of stuff has been calculated pretty cautiously by the IRFU. We're going to talk with Gary Breen about the weekend's Premier League action. Graham Hunt is going to join us in about 3 or 4 minutes' time to talk to us about the sacking of Julian Lopetegui, which we've been predicting now for a number of weeks here. So it won't be a surprise to OTB AM viewers that Lopetegui has been sacked. But I guess the 5-1 victory for Barcelona against Real Madrid was pretty surprising. Yeah,
it was a low ebb. Things probably couldn't have got much lower from a Real Madrid perspective, and they did. There was always this potential that there was going to be some sort of kick in them, but lost the dressing room, or maybe tried too hard to take control of the dressing room. There was some interesting quotes from Sergio Ramos in the aftermath of his sacking, so we'll get to that later on, I think.
All right, let's bring you through the newspapers now.
OTB AM.
Thanks to Screwfix.ie, championing the trade with a dedicated call centre.
Going to start with the Times today, the Irish Times. The Sports Tuesday, obviously. It is a Tuesday. If you're waking up this morning going, I can't believe it's Monday, it's Tuesday, don't worry about it. Mahrez makes his mark as City have their way at Wembley. It was difficult to reconcile the intrinsic weirdness of this occasion. Wembley yawned with empty seats. The pitch looked like a pudding, a legacy of Sunday's NFL game between the Jacksonville Jaguars and the Philadelphia Eagles. And for long spells, there was a strange lack of intensity. It's mad that Spurs can't sell out Wembley in London to all the tourists who were there on a bank holiday weekend. Maybe it's not a bank holiday in England, but anyway, who were there midterm. It's close enough to midterm, right? There aren't enough tourists to sell out Wembley for the visit of Manchester City. Sterling finds his perfect pitch on a night for directness, is Barney Roney's piece, on a surface scarred by the NFL. Come on. Scarred by the NFL. Scarred by Spurs. Scarred by Spurs.
I wonder, has he made the leap that because it was played on an appalling pitch, Raheem Sterling's performance last night proved that he was a gritty performer, despite all the horrendous conditions going on around him, playing on something that resembled the Gobi Desert. He managed to pull out a performance for the ages. I'm sure that line is in there somewhere. This was the moment when Raheem Sterling became a truly gritty player.
Cristiano Ronaldo's given a very self-serving interview to France Football magazine, blaming Fiorentina Perez for him leaving, for not getting enough love from Perez, and that's why he has left Real Madrid. He also says, woe is me, my family are really suffering because of this allegations of rape against me. Jude's failed to lay a glove on Mannion as Crokes regain crown. That's Paul Mannion kicking 1-5 or 1-7?
1-6.
1-6, there you go, in between. John Caulfield says he's happy to do things the Cork City way. Manager insists he's not envious of Dundalk's overseas financial backing, but the drop quote says, if a team keeps investing heavily and buying all the best players, of course you expect them to win. I'm not jealous, you're jealous. Jerry Thorney's piece is a few red cards, the price worth paying for safety, and Chicago could be another key staging post in Carberry's career. Carberry's expected to get the nod to start at 10 in Italy, and there's a good piece on Greg McWilliams, who was a guest on Friday Night Off the Ball last March in the Pig and Whistle when we did our live show. He is the director of rugby at Yale. He used to be a teacher at St. Michael's. He was the one we got to ask which is posher, St. Michael's or Yale.
What was the answer?
He refused to answer. A very cautious answer. Leicester give their players time. Grieving squad will decide today whether they are ready to play again this weekend. The likelihood is we expect that the game will happen next weekend, and then obviously Paul Mannion is the lead in that one. The Irish News for you. You can do that next if you want. Go straight to the Irish News. Kane pressures office. Cole Island midfielder relishing crack at Ulster Giants Cross McGlenn. It's not Harry Kane. The pressure's not off Harry Kane. It's Cole Island against Cross in the Ulster Club Football Championship. But that is a picture of Riyad Mahrez celebrating after scoring for City against Spurs last night. The back of the Irish Independent. Ruddock in line to lead Ireland against Italy. Cian Tracy is in Chicago, and he's saying that Rhys Ruddock is going to get to captain Ireland. Not the first time he's going to captain Ireland. Not the first time he's going to captain Ireland in America. Mahrez tribute to the boss, Pochettino, in Madrid site. So apparently Pochettino, who was making some funny sounds after the Spurs game, like, I don't have a good feeling. It's funny how...
Before the game, in fact.
Oh, okay. We've had our best start to the season, and I just don't feel it, you know. I just don't feel it around here. I don't feel like I'm not happy with the way things were done in the summer.
Well, it was like he said, it's strange, isn't it? It's our best ever start, and it's my worst ever feeling. How strange is that, everybody?
Yeah. Real Madrid have a job opening. What? I don't know. Maybe now's not the time for that. Totally unfair fixture schedule leaves staying Pat's boss fuming. This is the Wicklow champions. Casey O'Brien is his name. Having to play 24 hours, twice in 24 hours. I don't know who made the fixtures, but we were told they were set in stone. You had to play, and that's that. They allowed no time whatsoever for replays for the dual players. Nothing. I wonder what happens if they don't show up. I mean, they get kicked out, but like the outpouring of you can't kick them out. What happens?
Well,
let's test this theory.
I'm not sure if it will actually lead to anything much.
Purple rain. It's the purple jerseys. Mahrez strikes as City see off Spurs to regain top spot. The Promised Land, County Championship glory for Charleville and Kilmacud Crokes. And changes to judging system will ensure All-Stars represent the best of the best. Did you know this? That you can now get an All-Star. So if there's 3 brilliant midfielders, they're going to shoehorn one of them in as a defender or a forward.
Is that not what they always did?
An outfield player can be chosen for an award in an area other than the one they were nominated in. So I think you had to be nominated.
Right, okay.
I think that if you were... So say if Colin Kavanagh, James McCarthy and somebody else were all nominated as midfielders, you can push Kavanagh into the defence.
Right.
This is where he plays.
Yeah, that's... okay, so he can now be nominated as a defender, or
no matter where you're nominated,
you can be given a different award.
Yeah.
Right, so Kavanagh might show up in the backs then.
I mean, it's interesting he's saying that, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
Bookies on alert as Sam Crow sticks to hurdling. Sam Crow leapt to the head of the champion hurdle market yesterday after Connections confirmed that race would be his big target this season. A switch to fences had been an option for Sam Crow, a point-to-point winner who was anti-post favourite for the Arkle, JLT and RSA chases over the summer. So somebody is making a fair bit of cash from him picking there.
Back page of the Herald this morning is going with Manchester United and Jose's £100 million for January. United manager to get funds for centre-back and forward. So I think you can call that a war chest. I think that's the technical term for somebody who gets a bit of money like that. So 100 million quid for Jose Mourinho to spend in January. It's looking like he actually probably will survive until January. We were saying he was going to be gone by Christmas, or I was saying he was going to be gone by Christmas, but I'm now starting to change my view on that. Back page of the Irish Daily Mail is O'Neill's grief. Ireland boss pays tribute to Fox's chief, and Schmidt rests senior players for Chicago trip. So not everybody got the trip to Chicago. Not everybody who's not playing anyway. The likes of Rory Best, Johnny Sexton and Peter O'Mahony are going to be left at home. Back page of the Mirror is your call. Devastated Leicester players will be given the choice of when they return to Premier League action, and Mahrez says he was like a dad to me, speaking about the same story as well, pointing to the sky in a pretty poignant celebration there last night after his winner at Wembley. Back page of the Irish Daily Star goes with that picture of Mahrez as well. Heaven sent Mahrez tribute to Fox's chief after City win pitch battle. And Mannion kicks Crokes to glory on one leg. So he picked up a bit of a hamstring injury, I think, near the start of that game. He might now be a doubt for Kilmacud's journey through Leinster, but he was unbelievable last night. Scored 1-6, all of it from play, all of it on that left leg. Back page of the Sun then is Real jobs, all yours, Poch. Conte hopes KO'd by player power, and Mannion on a mission, says the headline on the Dublin County final. Front page of the Daily Telegraph sports section then is City are just pitch perfect. Mahrez seals victory to return City to the top despite Wembley's damaged surface. And it's also that story on the back of the Guardian. Moved Mahrez sends City back to the top, and home and broken-hearted Leicester's football family unite in grief and farewell.
All right, good stuff. Let's move on to the big story coming from Spain at the weekend, which is the sacking of Julian Lopetegui. Graham Hunter is with us. Graham, for one brief moment, we shouldn't allow the sacking of Lopetegui to overshadow the 5-1 that was the full-time result in the Clásico, because so frequently these results become the thing of legend, and particularly a 5-1 scoreline is a very storied thing in a Clásico. And while Real Madrid may be trying to make us forget it by sacking Lopetegui, that actually happened.
That's brilliant. I love coming on your show because that's the only interpretation of the sacking that I've heard explained that way. That will erase the 5-1 by sacking the coach. I take my hat off to you, Ger. It was an extraordinary game. I don't know. I was counting the other day. Maybe I've been to something in the region of 35, 36 Clásicos, and this would count as one of the strangest, partly because there was some glaringly intelligent football played by Barcelona in the first half, which really nicely unpicked Real Madrid's flaws, left them 2-0 up. They missed two serious chances to go 4-0 up. On percentage-wise, you'd have said normally Football Club Barcelona, with or without Messi, would have scored one of those. A 3-0 margin at half-time would have been gross, would have been the end of Lopetegui there and then. And then you both know that for the following 30 minutes, with a change of personnel, with a change of strategic lineup, Real Madrid ripped Barcelona apart. Barcelona looked disorganised, unsure about to close it down. Madrid scored once. Lovely third goal in 3 games from Marcelo with that belly control to put Piqué on his backside. Really, really smart. Apart from Modric hitting the post, they had umpteen chances to shoot and score. Benzema missed a really, really scoreable header. And at 75 minutes, not only was the game in the balance, Real Madrid had shown that they could equalise and win it. No question about that. And then Valverde's change makes all the difference. Dembele makes a really good choice of what to do. The ball's knocked in. If either of you have seen, well, for my money, since Didier Drogba in Munich that night of the Champions League final, a better header than Suarez from that distance to go top corner against Thibaut Courtois, who's about 17 metres tall. I've not seen a better header from Suarez throughout his illustrious career. That's 3-1. 4-1 a Ramos mistake, 5-1, Dembele crossing for Vidal. The Camp Nou bouncing up and down. I was commentating up in the gallery with Simon Hanley and Steve Archibald, Barcelona legend. And not since the 5-0 in 2010 have I literally felt the stadium shake, in that press gallery is hanging from the roof of the main stand. And I thought we were in a little bit of danger there. The building was moving. Everybody who isn't jumping is a Madrid fan, was the song. And yeah, it's storied because they call it the Manita. And you've seen Gerard Piqué in the modern era do that 5. There was a spell when Michael Laudrup played in one season's 5-0 for Barcelona, transferred exactly a year later to the day, played in a 5-0 for Madrid. That's the reason that it's so storied, in your words. And Lopetegui aside, it truly was a phenomenal game of football that whatever your colours, wherever you were in the world, you could sit down, watch and be thrilled, be reminded of how piquant, how confusing, how theatrical, how noisy, how sexy football is. It was just 90 minutes very well spent.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, so let's move on, because we've been talking for weeks about what would happen, what would need to happen for the Lopetegui decision to finally be made. 5-1 Clasico is going to do it for you, and sure enough, the trigger was pulled. So is there an immediate succession plan in place? Is the interim manager, who now is the shortest price, I think, with most bookmakers, actually really the interim candidate for the season? What's going to happen?
Typically for Spanish football, Ger, the picture is both clear and obscured. Santi Solari is taking training today. Santi Solari, most people remember as the big Zidane-sized, long-haired Argentinian winger-wide midfielder who played for Atleti and for Real Madrid. A seriously good footballer, a tough, on the football pitch, permanently angry man, creative, dangerous, decent in the air. He's been training what's called in La Fábrica, in the youth system, with a moderate record. Each year his teams have progressed in terms of where they finish in the league. He is a persuasive, very, very firm point of view kind of guy. I've had dinner with him, I've worked with him on television. He's a guy who always knows better than you, always knows best, which footballers sometimes respond to. Don't hear criticism in my words. But the rules in Spain say that he can only be an interim coach for 2 weeks, after which either he must be confirmed as the coach for the rest of the season and paid differently, or there needs to be a successor. The Conte question, I can make one thing really clear, having spoken to an associate of his, that Conte wants the job, has wanted to be Real Madrid coach for a large part of his career since he stopped being a player. I hadn't really believed that it would be feasible. It was, rather than an objective, it genuinely was one of these dream ideas. As the possibilities have narrowed, he's become ever more keen, actively wants the job, is still, I think, as you saw when he hung on in post at Chelsea, unwilling to even acknowledge that he was in danger or acknowledge that he might walk away because he wanted his payoff. He was angry at how he was treated by those above him at Chelsea, and he stuck in there saying you'll have to sack me. That same mentality is being applied to the negotiation process of the payoff. That makes him not quite available yet. Still more confusing, but pertinent. I mean, tell me if I'm wrong. Maybe in Ireland, maybe in England. You cover American sports. But in my view, only at Real Madrid. It's 5-1. It's Sunday evening. The journalists ask Captain Sergio Ramos, who is in the single worst form of his life, it's Conte. Conte's going to be next. Lopetegui hadn't even been sacked, so therefore Conte hadn't been appointed. And Ramos, in answer to a question about Conte's style, says, you don't impose respect, you have to gain it. In other words, Antonio, if you're coming here, the war has started already. Don't think you can come into my club and bully me, Sergio Ramos. And only in Spain can the captain of a club beaten 5-1 with the manager still in post start criticising the manager who hasn't yet been appointed. Clear?
Yeah, absolutely.
Is Solari a man who would impose some sort of discipline on his players, or is he kind of, I don't want to use the term yes man, but it's veering towards that nature, isn't it, with the player power that clearly needs to exist at Real Madrid for this squad to actually get the best out of themselves, looking at those Ramos comments that you mentioned?
A sort of Solari law. I think what we're talking about is a guy who is firm and stern, who would pick on players that he thought he could get away with pushing around for positive benefit. Pour encourager les autres. He could definitely be capable of that. He's not a yes man. He is independently visioned. He's very strong personality indeed. Clearly has an understanding of not just how to play but to coach too. I don't think, in full frankness, that he's either of the authority nor fully ready to take on this squad yet. It's in such disarray in terms of whether you want to call it temperament, physical preparation for the season. It's one of the things that's very little commented on, that Antonio Pintus, Zidane's fitness coach, is still on the staff but had been pushed way down the ranking, wasn't in charge of physical planning, and there is no doubt that Real Madrid, of the leading teams in Europe, look to my eye from what I've been watching in the 10 some more matches across European leagues, that they're not physically in the right shape to be carrying a lack of form or carrying a 90-minute performance. They've given, I think, maybe one 90-minute performance all season. That was against Roma. Otherwise, it's been patches of 30 minutes, even 40, 50 minutes, and then gone to sleep or screwed up. And therefore, Solari coming in and changing all of that, I think, is a distant prospect. Will they be left with no other option in him? Well, that's feasible. They wanted Conte. I'm not sure that Florentino Perez is impressed with a guy who doesn't jump immediately and say, yes, I'll take the job and I'll forget my negotiations with Chelsea. It's also Florentino Perez's custom at the moment to be listening. It's very much the captain's club at the moment in the training ground. The absence of Cristiano Ronaldo has left Sergio Ramos very much with the biggest personality, the loudest voice. Ronaldo's even butted into the picture, wouldn't he, with saying that I never believed that Florentino Perez was telling me came from the heart. Another outside voice to help answer your question is Jorge Valdano. At certain stages, not only a Real Madrid player, a Real Madrid league-winning coach, but also a director of football at the Bernabeu in Valdebebas. And he spoke up very firmly against the idea of Antonio Conte without directing it at Conte personally. And he said, this is a squad that teaches you the old idea that for a juvenile, naive squad, you get an authoritarian autocrat. For a hard-bitten, world-weathered squad like this one, you bring in a light hand on the tiller. And he named Roberto Martinez as the guy that he wants to see taking over. Now, clearly, first of all, I'll say that there's a big personality in UK football who's been proposing Roberto Martinez behind the scenes to a number of people, trying to manipulate the situation that might happen for about 10 or 12 days now. Initially, I would confess that I didn't think that, one, it would be to Florentino Perez's taste, appointing a Catalan, okay, not one associated with Football Club Barcelona, but also someone who, although he is clearly talented, articulate and relatively popular, his CV would make you wonder, well, is that an automatic recommendation for this deeply, deeply difficult job right now. And his candidacy being pushed forward by Valdano ensures that the media will catch on to not only the name, but the concept and begin to talk through, is Roberto Martinez the right personality? Has he done enough to convince everybody that A, he can turn the ship around, and then after that put them in the right direction in terms of playing style, results. So names abound. Will it be Solari? Will it be Conte? Florentino Perez has an unscratched itch for Joachim Low. As far as I know, and I'm not stating that I'm in the vanguard of knowledge about Joachim Low, there's been no indications that I can tell from contacts in Germany that he's willing to even countenance leaving Germany and taking over mid-season. Florentino Perez believes that he is the right candidate, but he's never once given that hint that, yeah, maybe now is the time. So, and nor did he in the summer, which understandably with a World Cup to defend, irrespective of how it turned out. So Lowe is somebody who seems to be the president's preference, but not available, and therefore between Roberto Martinez, Santi Solari, Guti, languishing in the background, way down the rankings, Antonio Conte, take a pick.
Pochettino?
Yeah, everybody talks about Poch, and there's absolutely no question whatsoever that in the summer, Florentino Perez knocked on the door. Will you come? My intuition, rather than stating fact, is that Pochettino played it very shrewdly and referred him to the president, referred him to Daniel Levy. Never once said no, never once said, yeah, get me out of here at all. I'm telling you with force things that you already know, but I have first-hand knowledge of Daniel Levy's position on, one, how dearly he's going to hang on to assets, and two, if that asset is determined to leave, how much it's going to cost. Now, I think that Florentino Perez understands. One, he absolutely hated the negotiations over Gareth Bale. He told people around the club, never again will I try to do business with Daniel Levy. So 1-0 Spurs on that front. It's also the case that he is saving money frantically, no purchases to speak of during the summer, that certainly none that cost a proper fee. Courtois bought very cheaply for a position he didn't need. And Mariano brought in for a very low fee from Lyon. They're saving money, one for the stadium, which has got a bill of up to 600 million. He wants to put a roof on it. Secondly, he has this undying dream to be able to prize Neymar out of Paris Saint-Germain and has been, building a war chest for that. To buy a coach for 20 million euros, whatever Daniel Levy will charge, I see that as an extraordinarily difficult deal to do with Florentino Perez. Take him if he was available, yes. I don't know what you were hinting at when I listened into the previous item, that maybe you felt that there were some smoke signals coming from Pochettino from Wembley last night in the defeat against Manchester City about, get me out of here, I'm a celebrity coach. I don't know. I think it's a deal that's very, very difficult to get done.
All right.
Well, why wouldn't there be smoke signals? Like, if you're a manager of literally any club in the world that's not Real Madrid, maybe there's 2 or 3 clubs that don't fall into the category of being a smaller club than Real Madrid. I personally think that if you're a man of ambition, which Mauricio Pochettino must be, I think, smoke signals are absolutely inevitable.
Can I put a different scenario to you? We're going through a phase that we've seen before with Vanderlei Luxemburgo and Lopez Caro. We're at a point at which I don't see it as in any way unlikely that there might not be 3 or 4 coaches over the next 18 months at Real Madrid. The problems, the complexity of the solutions, because there are solutions, but they aren't easy. We're coming to what I think has to be end of empire for Marcelo and Sergio Ramos. We're at a point whereby the coach not only needs to come in and work out how to buy the right new players and challenge those who are resting on their laurels, but there are certain players who need to be pushed out. That's going to be a bloody process. I think if you're a very shrewd coach who desperately wants that job, I think you can afford to bet that keeping yourself out of the supply right now will apply that market law of reduce the supply, increase the demand, and that this job may very well come around again in the summer, whereby somebody, whoever is in between now and April, may find it beyond them, may find it that they're relieved of their post. I hope for Real Madrid's sake I'm wrong, but there are conditions to indicate that you could stand away from the battle, tell Florentino Perez, I'll take this in the summer, and then be appointed in the summer with time to plan the use of the budgets, which players to get out, which players to get in, to do pre-season training properly without a major tournament, even if the new UEFA Nations League is held in Spain, if Spain beat Croatia and get through. That's the scenario I would say that shrewd coach is looking for.
Graham, great stuff. Thanks a million for joining us this morning. Cheers.
Cheers, lads.
Graham Winter with us there from Spain. The notion that Roberto Martinez is in the running for this job is amazing.
It makes sense, though.
It doesn't. He failed at Everton.
Yeah, but the idea that
Everton failure gets Real Madrid job 18 months later.
Everton needed someone to take control of that club, to grab the assets and just move in the right direction. Just take everything and overhaul things and be the exact opposite of what Real Madrid need. Be the exact type of personality that Sergio Ramos hates. So on the flip side of that, Roberto Martinez is the type of personality that Sergio Ramos loves. And it may seem ridiculous to say this, but finding a character who Sergio Ramos loves is one of the massive boxes that needs to be ticked in this situation.
Or you sell him now, especially when there's 100 million quid floating around from Manchester United for a defender at Christmas. You go, woohoo, 100 million quid and all our problems gone. And then
get Neymar.
But
next summer.
Spend the money on Pochettino or somebody's going to be long term. Do you legitimately think Roberto Martinez is the manager for...
No, I think Mauricio Pochettino is the manager for Real Madrid. I think in terms of the gettable managers, I know he's not available, but in terms of gettable managers, he would be number one.
Yogi Love, the unscratched itch, the unpicked nose, is obviously my favourite metaphor for that. So some quick talking points for you. One-man teams, Premier League cream, Joe Schmidt-Big Jack, GAA fixtures farce and Mannion masterclass. This is your breakfast menu this morning here on OTB AM. If you've got comments on any of the stuff that we're covering this morning, now would be a good time to get them in. We're going to run this through for the next 10 minutes for you. One-man teams, obviously. Harry Kane, Pep Guardiola. This wasn't the inspiration for this weekend. It was more the fact that Messi and Ronaldo were gone. Barcelona, not a one-man team. Real Madrid, a one-man team.
Well, clearly, the obvious comparison with everything that's happened over the course of the weekend is with the Cleveland Cavaliers after they got rid of their head coach as well at the weekend, just like Real Madrid had done in the season right after they've lost their perennial superstar. And it is bizarre that we're actually making this comparison between
Ronaldo and LeBron.
Well, yeah, but specifically between the impact that losing the greatest basketball player of all time has had on a basketball team.
Michael Jordan retired, did he?
Oh, there we go. We can get into this again. There'll be plenty of time to get into this. And one of the greats leaving a sensational team, like brilliant other parts around him at Real Madrid, terrible other parts around him at Cleveland when it comes to LeBron, and also it's basketball. One player can make a team. You're literally 20% of the team. So I think it's a really bad indictment of Real Madrid that we can actually make this comparison, but we can. And it does get you thinking, who are the other parts in world sport that if you just took them out, everything would fall to pieces? I think if you stick with American sports for a moment, Aaron Rodgers and the Green Bay Packers is clearly one example. If you take him out of the team, if you take with him, they're a playoff team. Without him, they're going to be a top 5 pick in the NFL draft potentially. Cristiano Ronaldo, I didn't think this would actually happen.
There's the Bleacher Report comparison that we're stealing this idea from. Cavs since LeBron left 0-6. Are we? That was a dirty look you're giving me there. Coach fired last in the East. Real Madrid 4 wins in 10 league games, 9th in La Liga. 9th in La Liga. In fairness, I think that the problem that Real Madrid had since Ronaldo left is that they picked the wrong manager under shitty circumstances.
Yeah, I think so.
That's their main issue. Not that Ronaldo has left.
No,
I think this breaks down because Cristiano Ronaldo was not the same striker when he left as he had been. They got 100 million quid for him at the right time and they didn't reinvest the money properly.
But that's what I mean. Cristiano Ronaldo is not the difference between Real Madrid being a mid-table team and a Champions League winning team, 3-time Champions League winning team. That is not the difference between these two teams. So there's definitely other factors there and they're not entirely comparable. But
however, Harry Kane, if you snuff out Harry Kane, because Spurs have been, as we were saying, the record number of points for this point in the season in the Premier League, which is kind of a bullshit made up thing anyway, right? But because it's completely dependent on the fixtures and who you get when you get them. Harry Kane hadn't been playing particularly well, so that was the proof that they weren't a one-man team. Guardiola was like, "Oh, I'm sorry, it's not. I meant the Harry Kane team, as in, oh, it's the Harry Kane team. Like they're really good. Harry Kane's a good thing." This Guardiola kind of talking them all down from the ledge, buttering them up before they bore them to a 1-0 defeat. It's like Pep is just like a little cat playing with the mouse of Spurs.
There's complete truth in what he said. The bore 1-0, of course, we can attribute to being a terrible pitch. Nothing to do with Manchester City.
Absolutely. And nothing to do with Spurs either, from all the Spurs fans in the media for whatever reason. The Mannion masterclass last night, if you haven't seen any of this stuff, there are 3-minute highlights knocking about on the internet. There's a case of Paul Mannion is like just rising to the peak of his career at the moment. When you think back, like he was in Jim Gavin's first championship team, and he's kind of, so obviously when he came back from his few months away, Gavin didn't put him straight back in the team. But he is one of Gavin's favourite players. Jim Gavin loves him because he's the one at right corner back making the interception. He's the one catching the ball on the goal line at one end of the pitch, putting his head down, sprinting, taking possession a couple of times, and then fisting it over the crossbar. Like, if there was a player cam on him, there's a good chance that we would be looking at Player of the Year candidacy.
Yeah.
But there's also a couple of games where he gets taken off after missing stuff, and you wonder, are they just checking his GPS and going, well, he's already run 18 kilometres. We know that he peaks out at 19, and they use him to that point, and that's why he's coming off. Is there like
that's an interesting theory?
I don't know. I mean, it doesn't make any sense sometimes when they see him. You like, why are they taking off Mannion at this point? What's the point of that? I don't really get it.
Yeah, neither do I sometimes, and I think there's been a general underappreciation prior to this year about what Paul Mannion can do and his capabilities, because we've really talked up the idea of Dublin being a great team without any outstanding individual getting the limelight, and that is because they're all at a fairly similar level of complete excellence. But Paul Mannion, I think particularly in the National League this year, people started to turn their heads and they were like, hold on a minute, they do have a singular focal point here if they wanted it. If he was on any other team in the county, any other team in the country, he would be their best forward, or he would have a chance of being their marquee forward, to use that overused term. He's been his left foot is one of the best in Ireland. I think just looking at players like him playing for their club, it just kind of hammers home how bloody good they are.
He's only 25.
Well, that's the thing.
He's 27, 28, so he's just peaking. Assuming the pace stays and the injuries don't get him, if he can keep the pace, and if he can, well, that's basically if he can just be injury free. If the hamstrings are okay, even notwithstanding how dominant he was in yesterday's game, he did that with a hamstring injury fairly early on in the match.
But the thing is, his year in China probably will have delayed his tailing off in his career. That year out that a lot of people talk about, particularly the likes of Dan Carter, Richie McCaw, both taking years out, it was like, yeah, I was probably on course to crash out of my career around 30, but actually my tailing off period actually came at the age of 34, 35.
Next talking point this morning for you is the GA fixtures farce. This is the fact that the Wicklow champions had 24 hours of celebrating being Wicklow County champions before getting knocked out of the Leinster Championship, and it just doesn't make any sense. It just doesn't make any sense. What's the point in ruining the greatest achievement that a club has had in a long period of time by forcing them to play the next day?
Well, the idea that you brought up earlier on about them potentially just not fulfilling the fixture, that might have led to kind of a deeper sense of satisfaction around St. Pat's GA Club in Wicklow, because A, you get to go out and tear on the Saturday night, and B, you get a sense that you're some part of a bigger protest that might actually lead to something better. If you are that convinced you are not going to win the game, then there could be worse courses of action. They lost by 10 points in the end. Like, they may not have beaten Road anyway. Road obviously have been through and navigated the Leinster Championship quite a bit from Offaly, so there was no guarantee that they would have done that at all.
Yeah, I mean, what level of handicap do you put on Night on the Piss? 10 points about right? So
well, it's probably close enough to on the button, to be honest.
Maybe these two teams are this exact same standard, and it's just like, you know, you guys go out and celebrate like you've just won your first county title in a long time, and we'll be tucked up in our beds. Yeah,
well, the St. Pat's manager made a very valid point that if the tables had been turned and Road had been out in the batter the night before and St. Pat's hadn't, then St. Pat's would probably have won the game, which maybe illuminates just how hard they partied on Saturday night.
Yeah, they partied like it was the first time in however long.
I wonder, was it the first time ever that a team took to the field in a provincial championship match and there was a smell of drink off their man marker?
I'd say no. I'd say definitely not. Joe Schmidt-Big Jack. So this is a comparison made by Tommy Conlon in today's Times Ireland edition, I think. That's right?
Yeah, but there's kind of a few other pieces doing the rounds as well that kind of just have hallmarks of Big Jack. Like, obviously, you talk about great foreign coaches in Ireland, and, Big Jack, of course, is Irish and as Irish as can be at this point. But Joe Schmidt is on that level of being an honorary Irishman very, very quickly. It's Cian Tracy in the Irish Independent. I might get the exact line. Like something here that I hadn't really seen before when it comes to tying down players who aren't playing or who aren't grafting their trade on Irish shores. So Will Addison obviously is the very famous example. He was over in Sale, and when the Enniskillen chain and his family was discovered by Joe Schmidt, he made it his mission to make sure that Will Addison was brought into the Ireland fold. And you look at some of the players that were brought in to the RFU system. You've got Addison, you've got Billy Burns, and you've got Mike Haley. Not kind of the traditional foreign powerhouses that would be brought into Irish rugby, because they've all got Irish lineage and they were all eligible for Ireland. But the interesting thing when I say that I hadn't heard this before was that Addison happened to be holidaying in Melbourne this summer. Now, I do wonder if Joe Schmidt had any part to play in Will Addison's holiday plans. Ringing him up, he's like, I heard Melbourne's pretty nice in June. If it's good. Good nightlife, good party vibe in the middle of the summer. You should definitely go there on your holidays.
There's a pair of tickets nestling in your inbox.
Oh, there's a hotel right beside where we're training. Do you want to come in and train with us?
Oh, we've got a spare room.
We've got a spare room. And that seems...
the honeymoon suite? Yeah, of course.
That seems to be the situation with Addison. So absolutely top class from Joe Schmidt, kind of doing what Big Jack used to do. It's like, but Big Jack obviously was far more out there in terms of finding Irish links. I think these were kind of more better known Irish links.
And everybody's comfortable with this?
I'm comfortable with this.
Yeah.
It's going to lead to the success of the Irish rugby team. Of course I'm comfortable with this. Like, put on those green glasses, Jar, and get behind this.
I mean, or take all the international glasses off and go, ultimately, you want teams of fairly equal standard playing against each other. That's very hard to do when one team has a population centre of 60 million, when it's the national sport of another team. So what do you do to balance it up? You go, well, you can have whatever players are not available to these other countries if they live in your country for three to 5 years. And
well, yeah, the most important thing about this, though, is that Eddie Jones clearly didn't spot the potential of Will Addison. So Joe Schmidt has, in the process of securing a good talent for Ireland, made Eddie Jones look rather silly, which is absolute guaranteed win.
So one more talking point for you before we get to Gary Breen. This is
the Premier League top three at the moment. I think we've got a graphic from a Twitter account that kind of just showed the statistics that back up this idea that the cream is rising to the top and is going to stay there in the Premier League. We'll get that up in just a moment. But basically, it's the three unbeaten, first time since 1991. And only the third time in history that the top three teams in the league have remained unbeaten this far into the season. Miguel Delaney had a piece as well on Friday saying that the top six are just separating themselves from the rest of the league quite significantly at this point. And if it wasn't for Manchester United having quite an individual case of falling close to flat in their face, then this would be even more significant. So 2018-2019, Manchester City, Liverpool and Chelsea all unbeaten. 78-79, Liverpool, Everton and Forest. And in 1991, Liverpool, Arsenal, Spurs and Palace. Just the third time now that more than two teams have remained unbeaten in their opening 10 matches of the same top flight season. And it's no coincidence, you do suspect.
Gary Breen is with us. Good morning to you, Gary. How are you doing?
Very well. Good morning, guys.
That's an interesting enough stat that we're looking at 1990-91, the last time that we had as many teams unbeaten at this point. That was a pretty exciting denouement to the end of the 1990-91 season.
Yeah, listen, it's quite interesting looking at. As a player in the Premier League who would have been playing for those lesser teams, I always felt we would always go after the bigger teams. And you do feel now that the teams now are a little bit subservient, damage limitation. We obviously seen Rafa Benitez, Newcastle doing that, setting up that way. And it's frustrating, really, because the competitiveness of the Premier League is something that the world has admired, that the bottom teams come on the day, beat the top teams in stark contrast to, say, like La Liga as such. But it's frustrating to see that stat come out.
One of the other things I wanted to generally talk about was the that separation that Owen was talking about. It's happening a little bit at the bottom as well, that the really bad teams are getting cut adrift a little bit earlier in the season here. We're looking at Huddersfield of 3 points, Newcastle of 3 points, and then Fulham and Cardiff have 5 points. Then there's a tiny bit of a gap to Southampton and Burnley. But it just feels as if there are very good teams and there are some very bad teams And that kind of evening off of standards that we've seen in recent seasons isn't going to happen this year.
No, I'd agree. I think what we're seeing with Manchester City, certainly under Pep Guardiola, is an exceptional team, and of course Liverpool are producing something of their best. But you're right. I think some of the teams under the top six, I think the level of quality has dropped in the Premier League. I've no doubt about that. You look at the likes of Huddersfield; they just can't score, and if that's the case, you're never going to survive in the Premier League. And I think more often than not now, it's just about clubs as such getting into the Premier League initially, and then probably having to take a step back, go back into the Championship, but they've got all the Premier League money to consolidate and come back again a lot stronger. And I think that's something that we saw with Burnley. They were the ones who were able to do that, and they've gone on from strength to strength. I know they're having their struggles here at the moment, but I don't see that going on for particularly a long time this season.
When you talk about that exceptional Manchester City team, I think obviously the conversation will probably have it if they go back to back about them once again potentially being the greatest Premier League team of all time. You don't wonder, looking at Liverpool's early season form, if they don't win the Premier League this season, if they are the best Premier League side to not win a Premier League title. Is that getting ahead of ourselves too much in terms of how good the top three is?
Well, I think I look at it, certainly Manchester City against Liverpool. I still think as well as Sarri's done with Chelsea, they're a work in progress, certainly defensively. I know Hazard elevates that team, but this Manchester City team's exceptional. And even when you make that comparison to the great Premier League teams, which unfortunately, or fortunately, but it felt unfortunately at the time I played against, the Arsenal team, the treble-winning United team, Jose Mourinho's first Chelsea team as well. Really top teams. And if you look at it, I think a lot of those players will probably get in a starting 11 ahead of this Manchester City. And that's why it's incredible the body of work that Pep Guardiola has done, because he's getting players to do things you would never normally associate. The very fact that Manchester City are so good at winning the ball back, and it's not as if they've got a Vieira, a Keane, a snarling central midfielder ball winner who does it. It's David Silva who's doing it. It's Kevin De Bruyne. It's Sterling. They're kind of picking the pockets of the opposition, and it's so difficult to even get a strike on goal against Manchester City.
Why? Well, like, what is it that Guardiola's doing that's able to make these players perform like that?
It's brilliant. And it's gone under the radar, to my frustration anyway, as someone who admires defensive play. He's such a brilliant defensive coach, and everyone talks about how good these teams are going forward. But it's no coincidence in all these 10 seasons. I think his teams had, in 9 of the 10 seasons as a manager, they've had the best defensive record. I know people say, well, you've got the best players, but it's more than that. He's getting players to do things that are so alien to them. And as you're in opposition, because you're fatigued in terms of how much they control possession, invariably when you get the ball back and you get your head up to make a pass, you can't even get in their half, it seems. And I just think that they're just going to go to another level. I know we talked about how well Jurgen Klopp has recruited with Liverpool and how good they look, but I just don't see anyone bridging the gap to Manchester City. I really don't. And the frustration is that I look at their back four, and it's not a case of them being a brilliant defenders, because all of that back four that played last night, all their strengths are going forward. They're not defensively. And we probably think, well, listen, you can get at them as such, but you can't, because you couldn't get at Yaya Toure, you couldn't get at Mascherano when they were playing centre half at Barcelona. You just don't have the ball, and that's not a fluke. It's by design. It's by coaching. It's by being in the right place. It's by attacking with the ball so that as soon as you lose it, you can get it back straight away. And he is just an absolute genius of a coach.
We were having a conversation last week, and there was some suggestion that there perhaps isn't enough nasty individuals in this current Manchester City team, and that might be the one thing stopping them going from back to back. That kind of very large level of ruthlessness perhaps doesn't exist in the side. I'm not so sure about that. I think Fernandinho is the one nasty individual that Manchester City certainly have, and I think his performance last night was outstanding, despite not showing the hallmarks, I should say, of nastiness that we perhaps want to see from this Manchester City team.
Well, they're professional, they're subtle. This is the thing. You don't think it's particularly bad. It's not crunching tackles. It's little puller jerseys. It's little blocking people. And you'll see, if you watch Manchester City play, that they commit so many fouls. And it's no surprise, because Pep Guardiola's Barcelona teams and obviously the iconic Spanish teams who have won so many trophies in terms of the national team, they were brilliant at it. Just little fouls here, the dark arts, and they do it brilliantly well, Manchester City. It goes underneath the radar. As soon as you look to break, they stop it. Little foul, little pull of the shirt, little trip. They don't look particularly mean as such. Then they pick them up and say sorry, and they look at the referee and go, oh, it's an accident. And they don't get booked. It's just there's so much to admire about this Manchester City team.
Where does that culture come from? Who teaches, because you don't...
Spanish. It's the Spanish culture. It's from the manager, without a shadow of a doubt, because You weren't seeing any of these Manchester City doing it under the snarling Roberto Mancini, were you, as such, and how demonstrative he was on the sidelines? But it's just so subtle. It's little like pulls of the arm that stops you in the tracks, just allows. And it comes if when you're a player and you're playing against Spanish teams or the Spanish national team, they're brilliant at it. They barely touch you, but it's enough to knock you off your stride. And you look around at the ref and say, "Stop me!" And he went, "It wasn't too bad, was it?" And we're tearing into people, trying to cut people in half, going into books, getting sent off. He's brilliant, Guardiola. I mean, I'm going to wax lyrical about him all day long, but he's just been unbelievable. And this is the problem that not only Mourinho faces in his own city in Manchester, but the Premier League and I'd hazard a guess, or Europe now, because this looks like the start of a real dynasty or whatever of football there. I think it bodes so well for City, so difficult for their opponents.
Yeah, because there was always the suspicion that Guardiola was going to burn out wherever he went, that he had a certain lifespan. And it feels that maybe that was always going to be the case at Barcelona because of the pressures of that job and the kind of identity that he had with it. It also seems like at Bayern, it wasn't a very natural fit. You had all those former players who were so important and who didn't kind of like that style. But here, it doesn't really feel as if there is that same level of pressure or intensity at Manchester City because, I mean, let's face it, the owners, this is a pastime for them. So they're not ringing him up every day going, what the hell's going on? Why are we only winning 1-0 last night in London? They're like, I see what you're doing with our money and we're pretty happy with it. So
yeah, I mean, you're right there. I think that ultimately you look at Manchester City and there's no history of winning like there was at Bayern, like there was at Barcelona. And you're right. I think the only fear of burnout will come from Guardiola himself, that he's so intense and that he's demanding all the time. And he does need a sabbatical just to recharge the batteries. But you would hope that that doesn't happen at Manchester City because there's something special there. And if you were to take him away, with all the manager that they have, they wouldn't be replicating what they have. It's Guardiola. And I know they've got some special players. Of course they have. But those special players are doing things you would never normally see them do. And all of those players have elevated their game, their quality to another level under Guardiola.
And it's interesting when you look at the hierarchy and you look at some of the boardroom kind of conversations that were shown in the documentary recently, and I think that there is a culture of ruthlessness in that boardroom, and that is a culture of winning ultimately in the modern business-oriented world of football. And you do wonder if it's curious chatting about this, given their opponent last night in Tottenham Hotspur, if there is that lack of ruthlessness at the upper echelons of that football club. Maurizio Pochettino, of course, at this point, well-reported quotes before the game saying that it's his worst feeling to a start of a Premier League season.
Yeah, I was staggered by that quote. I'd done a piece leading into the weekend saying that Tottenham are at a real crossroads. The very fact that they had the best start to their Premier League season, people were asking me, what do you mean? And I could sense it because I don't think there's more to achieve with this Tottenham team as such. I think over the last 3 or 4 seasons, I think they're further away from the Premier League title than they've ever been, despite their start and despite the loss last night. I just feel that Pochettino's probably looking at it and he may well be thinking, have I reached the ceiling at Tottenham? Now, it will be an amazing decision for him to leave them just as they're going into this fabulous new stadium. But this brilliant new stadium, what's it going to mean ultimately to the pitch? Because it stopped them strengthening what has been a brilliant Tottenham team over the last couple of seasons. I talked about timing in football, and I think timing has been cruel on this Tottenham team because at a stage when they were just a couple of signings away from genuinely winning the Premier League, I felt they had to build this new stadium, so the money just wasn't there. And I think that Pochettino is very aware of what people are saying about him now, that he's a fabulous manager, but he's never won anything. I think he went to Southampton and people raised a lot of eyebrows, but he realised straight away that the timing was right to get out of there. He went to Tottenham, and I think the concern now will be that he can't take them to where he wants to be as a manager, and that's winning titles.
Yeah, it's hard to see how all of a sudden Daniel Levy decides that he wants to invest 150, 200 million in that team. And because we had Graham Hunter on earlier on, he was saying that it's clear that Pochettino is wanted by Real Madrid, but that Real Madrid would have to pay a bunch of compensation, perhaps up to 15, 20 million to get him out. And that's never happened for a manager before. And there's kind of not a hatred, but not far off it for Levy for the way that he handled the Gareth Bale negotiations on the part of Real Madrid. So there's tension already within that relationship. So Pochettino's going to have to force it. And it's hard. It feels like he's trying to manipulate that situation, but it's a long goodbye as opposed to a short goodbye.
Yeah, listen, in terms of forcing it, Joe, I'm not convinced that he needs to. I genuinely don't believe that for Pochettino, this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to manage Real Madrid. I think that job, it comes up reasonably regularly, doesn't it, over a couple of season periods. So it will come round again for him, there's no doubt. And I don't see his stock crashing to such an extent where they wouldn't want to court him again. But I just feel that from a personal level, he must look at the scenario and think, because his body of work at Tottenham is absolutely incredible. I talked about Pep Guardiola, what he's done, but I look at what Pochettino's done at Tottenham as well. It's amazing in terms of what he's created there, that young, vibrant team. He's created wealth that Tottenham didn't have. And people say about Harry Kane coming through. Harry Kane wasn't a Robbie Keane. He wasn't a Wayne Rooney. He wasn't Michael Owen, who was destined to be a top player. Pochettino's made him it. And listen, he's got to take a lot of the plaudits in terms of his hard work, Harry Kane, but it was Pochettino who gave him his opportunity that no other manager was. It wasn't as if the Tottenham hierarchy thought that they had a brilliant player coming through, because they didn't. He was loaned out to all the lower league clubs. And he's done it so often, Dele Alli for £5 million. And even the players that he did have that they spent money on, the likes of Ericsson, Vertonghen, Alderweireld, they've just gone to another level under him. So I think he'll look at that and he'll probably think, I don't think I can do any more with this team. And that's the real worry for Daniel Levy, for all the Tottenham supporters, because if he's to leave Tottenham now, it's an absolute disaster. I've said it before, there's some shocking things in the Premier League, the likes of Sol Campbell defecting to go to Arsenal. I think it's just surpassed that, because Tottenham look, with a new stadium, with this young team, they're on the cusp of something. If he goes, it will fall down.
Gary, great stuff. Thanks a million for joining us this morning.
Thanks, lads.
Gary Breen giving us some thoughts there on the situation at Spurs and Manchester City in the Premier League. Here are the thoughts of Brian Kerr, who was part of our commentary team at the weekend, talking about Paul Pogba.
At times he was unplayable. He ran the show. There was beautiful silky touches, little flicks here and there, spotting passes 30-40 yards. And then he's the one who's responsible for giving the ball in the way at the middle midfield, trying to be a little bit too fancy. Am I being harsh on him there?
No, you're not being harsh on him, and yet they could have got away with it if Smalling had done his job better, if he stayed on his feet a little bit longer. Richarlison was at an angle that he wasn't going to score from. We saw De Gea make several saves on his near post in the match. I think he would have saved any shot if indeed Richarlison had got a shot away. But Smalling made the error. Yes, Pogba made that error. There was no cover for him. There's a little bit of him that gets... there's a nonchalance about him at times, and the carelessness that he tries the hard, difficult one, the fancier one that looks well, but is not the sensible thing to do at certain stages of the game. So his decision making is certainly open to question, and he doesn't seem to be getting any better on that side of it. But watching him with the ball and some of the stuff he did with the ball was brilliant. And the pass he gave, the choice of pass he gave, the weight of the pass from Martial to knock it into the net was superb. It was the right choice at that moment. He doesn't always make them, but there was some brilliant passes. The one in the first half to Martial on the right hand side of the pitch, where he just drifted it in behind Seamus Coleman to the far flank, was very good. So, we saw it all with him today, the good, the bad and the indifferent.
The good, the bad and the indifferent. That's Brian Kerr talking about Paul Pogba. A reminder, OTB AM is live every morning with Screwfix.ie, championing the trade with a choice of over 20,000 quality trade products. Darren is here to run us through everything that's going on in the world of sport. Darren, how are you?
Good morning, Ger. Very well. It's a very good morning as well if you're of a Kilmacud Crokes disposition, because Keane O'Sullivan was delighted to end their long wait for glory. They took the top prize in Dublin club football last night at Parnell Park. Paul Mannion stole the show. He was instrumental, kicking 1-6 as the Stillorgan men overcame St Jude's on a scoreline of 2-12 to 13 points. The Dublin Senior Football Championship final at Parnell Park makes up for the defeat in the hurling somewhat over the weekend as well. The Stillorgan men can now look forward to a clash with Meath team Dunboyne in the Leinster Championship. O'Sullivan has been telling Oisin Langan what the victory means to everyone.
Look, it's incredible. I won my first Dublin Championship in 2008. I didn't think it was going to be another level, and we won another one in 2010. We thought it was going to be glory years for Kilmacud, those couple of years to come after, and it's been 8 long years since we picked up this trophy again. So it's an incredible feeling. They're not easy come by. It's a very competitive championship, the Dublin Championship. So, we're absolutely ecstatic, and we're hoping it's not the end of it.
How does it feel to do it in the style you've done it? You've done it playing lovely football, beautiful football.
Yeah, that's the mandate that's been set out to us. And there's a lot of talk about strategies and tactics these days, and we were given a very simple instruction: just go out there, work hard, play with your heart and your sleeve, and that's the main thing. Play with your heart instead of your head. And we're really enjoying it. Our style of play, I think, shows that it's an attacking foot passing game the way it's supposed to be played, and you know, we're really enjoying our football at the time, and go enjoy. Really looking forward to celebrating this.
That's Chemical Croaks, Oisin Langan. Just to point that out.
I'm sorry, but anybody who uses the word mandate in a post-match interview deserves to be the next Dublin manager. So straight away, hallmarks of the next Jim Gavin right there.
Yeah, but serious joy in the voice of Cian O'Sullivan there. A great achievement. There won't be an almond milk in Stillorgan for a week.
Oh, look at that.
Manchester City are back on top of the Premier League table. The defending champions beat Tottenham 1-0 at Wembley last night. Riyad Mahrez got the goal in what was a very emotional night for him. Mahrez involved in arguably the most remarkable sporting achievement of all time when Leicester won the Premier League title. He dedicated his goal to the man who masterminded that victory. We see Siwatana Prapa.
It was a difficult weekend for me and for all the Leicester fans and the Leicester players. Yeah. It was like a dad for us, you know, for me. I spent many memories with him. It was shocking and heartbreaking to hear this news, and it's difficult to speak about it, but you know, it's sad. I spent like 4.5 years there, and I have many memories with him. He was such a good person, such a good human. So I'm very sad, and that's why when I scored, I put my hands in the sky for him.
Now, it is being left up to the Leicester City players to decide whether or not they will take part in the game with Cardiff on Saturday. The club also considering renaming their stadium after the owner, Wishai Siwatana Prapa, tragically killed in a helicopter crash on Saturday night. The Leicester chairman, one of 5 passengers who lost their lives following an accident after the helicopter crashed after takeoff following the 1-1 draw with West Ham. In a statement from King Power, a business also owned by the deceased Leicester owner, it says the King Power Stadium is a celebration of Vishai's successful business, and we would be open with family, club and supporter consultation to discussing a name change in his honour. Derry City also looking to replace a sacked manager. They axed Kenny Shields over the weekend, as well as Real Madrid with Julian Lopetegui. The former Donegal boss Jim McGuinness has emerged as a candidate for that gig. The Northern Ireland under-21 manager Ian Barclough is being linked with the job as well.
Did you just link Derry City and Real Madrid jobs and do it with a straight face?
I did, yeah. I did. The former Derry boss Declan Devine guided them.
Which job is Jim McGuinness linked with? The Real Madrid job?
I have to double check the copy, but I'm pretty sure it's the Real Madrid job. Declan Devine, Jim McGuinness, Ian Barclough reportedly on the list. Now, McGuinness interestingly ruled himself out of the Mayo job when it was up a couple of months ago. He said he's not looking for a return to GAA management. He told OTB back in August, "I'm ready to take on a managerial position in soccer. The most important thing now is not about getting a club, it's about getting the right club."
Like, when you talk about high risk and high-risk first jobs as the actual premier person in coaching, like, you leave yourself quite open with that role.
There's no such thing as a low-risk job in professional football, especially in Ireland. I mean, they're all pretty risky.
Yeah, I would say they're almost higher risk in Ireland than anywhere else, but the problem is, who else is going to pick him up? Would a Scottish Premiership team pick him up as a manager, lower half Scottish Premiership?
Scottish First Division?
No, absolutely not. He's not getting a professional job in Scotland.
Scottish First Division?
I can't see it happening. It's a big stretch from performance consultant or whatever the title was.
No, there was a full-time gig at Celtic, I'm sure.
It was a full-time gig, but it wasn't based around managerial or tactics, as far as I understand. It was very much so about getting the best out of players. It was a type of life coach role, but he does have all the qualifications to be a manager, and he is trying to get more so into that sphere.
He was assistant manager to Roger Schmidt, wasn't he? Over in China?
He probably was assistant manager in China, yeah.
I don't know, I thought that was a big step up. I thought that was kind of like the gateway into an actual real job, if you want to use that, because I agree, at the start it kind of looked like, well, this guy's been brought in because he worked a small miracle with Donegal, and that's certainly the way it looked on the outside.
On the pitch, Finn Harps have a 1-goal advantage to take into Friday's promotion relegation playoff second leg against Limerick. Paddy McCourt's penalty on his final appearance at Ballybuffet, the only goal of the game. Well, Besiktas want to return goalkeeper Loris Karius to Liverpool. According to reports in Turkey, the club are eager to offload the German despite him being only a quarter of the way through a 2-year loan deal. The club have been unimpressed with the keeper and have prioritised signing a new striker as soon as possible. They might still do business with Liverpool. They want to give Karius back and take Divock Origi, according to reports in Turkey.
I can just imagine Karius getting on a plane for their next away match, and it's like, where's the rest of my team?
Wait, this is going to Liverpool.
Lands with John Lennon.
Cristiano Ronaldo says the rape allegations are having a terrible impact on his family. The Juventus player has given an interview to France Football magazine, and he has reiterated that his belief that he has every confidence that his name and reputation will be restored. Catherine Mayorga has filed a civil lawsuit in America claiming she was raped by Ronaldo in a Las Vegas hotel room in 2009. Police have also reopened an investigation at her request. Ronaldo quoted today as saying, "Of course this story is interfering in my life. I have a partner, 4 children, an ageing mother, sisters, a brother, a family I'm very close to, not to mention my reputation, which is of somebody who is exemplary. I feel the worst for my mother and sisters. They're stunned by it all. At the same time, very angry. This is the first time I've seen them in this state."
Darren, great stuff. Thanks very much for that. Here is Tralee Warriors' Kieran Donaghy chatting to Oisin Langan after their win over Temple Oak.
Crowds are storming the floor. I've got a camp with huge numbers next week. The game is thriving, you know. I can't wait to. All these guys are going to be coaching in my camp. We've got a few people coming over from America. The game is thriving, you know. We've had a sponsor, Sport and Dars, came on this year with me so they wanted to be a part of the camp, but they said to me they wanted to be a part of basketball. We've got the huge event in Belfast where sport changes life. 8 college teams coming to this country to play real games. So the game is thriving. NBA is very relevant. We all have it on our phones every morning. So it's great. It's the game I love. It's the game I'm most passionate about. So it's very proud for me to have that the Tralee team are pulling their weight at the top level of Irish basketball, and the amount of young talent we have in the town are aspiring to follow in our footsteps. I don't have too much long left of me, but I want to lay the path for all these kids to come through and be able to play at the top level.
And just before I let you go, because you've got a long trip back to Tralee tonight, granted not as long as it was the last time you left your Blaine home.
It'll be a short trip tonight.
What does this win in a cup mean to your season? Because as you said yourself, this is the big one, this is what you want to win. Had you gone out tonight, the season might have dragged a bit, it might have been harder to motivate yourselves.
Yeah, well, I think we're a totally different team than we were last year. Our whole philosophy, you'd know that from watching us, we were a walk it up the court team last year. You know, now we're a run and gun team. It's a joy to play in, and it's when you're trying to build a new philosophy like Pat and Pa and John are trying to do with us. It takes a win like this to really reaffirm what we're doing is right, and it's the right way for us as a team. And we've known it all along, but I think that win tonight will just give us that bit of belief that we're going in the right direction. We got to keep training hard. We got to keep our feet in the ground. We got to come back next Tuesday night harder, training at each other, keep driving and demanding more of each other. There's a long season. You saw what it was like last year. 3 games to go and 5 teams could win it. So the league is unbelievable. You know, this cup, the Hula Hoops Cup, is hard to win. And we got the Champions Trophy, so there's 3 trophies up for grabs. We're very early in the season, so we won't be getting carried away with ourselves.
Kieran, well done tonight.
Thanks a million.
Yeah, so the basketball season is up and running and flying, and Kieran Donaghy there in great form talking about it. You were just saying there, it's a good point that he made about the fact that every morning it's on kids' phones when they wake up. Like, the NBA got that bang on really quick. We're going to get our information out there and get as many people to see it as possible, which means people will want to go and watch the games live, which means people will buy tickets and buy gear and become our supporters and our fans, as opposed to, well, we're going to ring fence our rights and our highlights on this one site, and fewer and fewer and fewer people are going to get to see them.
Yeah, definitely. I do think as well, though, basketball is one of the most Instagram-ready sports that exist out there. When he says people open their phone every morning and they see it, he's totally right about that. Every morning I scroll on, it's like you have 3 or 4 of the best dunks from one night, because A, there's so many games, and B, there's so many opportunities within each game for you to actually just put up 1 or 2 Instagram clips from each account that are relevant and put up that sort of stuff. So it's absolutely packed on your newsfeed every morning you wake up. And like the NBA have even reacted in that, and they know exactly what their product is, these sort of short, bite-sized availability moments. And they're actually selling last quarter rights this year. So if you want to just watch the last quarter of an NBA game, you pay whatever it is, I think $4 or something like that, and you can just watch the last quarter of a match for on your phone, on your TV, whatever. It's like it's a special part of the NBA Game Pass. So that kind of sums up exactly where they're going, and kind of the culture, the outfits, the celebrity kind of nature of the audience and stuff like that. It's just, there's so much content available from the NBA, and it absolutely packs kids' news feeds every morning.
Yeah, and they understand that the players being influencers is a really good thing for them, and that they're riding the coattails of that, as opposed to trying to shut them down and take them over, or It's a collaborative process as opposed to some of the other sports, which seems to be...
They don't feel a threat from the players.
Yeah, and the players seem to be happy enough to work with the organisation, as opposed to, again, you just parking the issues around Cristiano Ronaldo at the moment, just for the purposes of this conversation. The whole notion that Perez looked at him as a business as opposed to something more than that is not a mistake that the NBA players would make, because they all understand that, because it's an upfront, how can our businesses work together here to help each other, as opposed to the whole kind of pretense of, oh, you're going to be loyal to our club because we have this fan base and history and tradition. It's like, those days are gone.
But the thing is as well, if you compare it to the NFL, like the common question is, why don't NBA players protest against police brutality the way NFL players do, given that NBA players are just as active, it's just as multiracial as the NFL is, if not more, and the fact of the matter is they're just happier individuals in their own organisation. I think there's some truth in that.
We'll come back to that and to the AFL plundering of Irish resources in the GAA a little bit later on the show as well. If you want to get in touch with us, you can of course drop us a line on Twitter. We would recommend though that you subscribe to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/offtheball. It's a big opportunity for you every morning to get a little notification when we go live, or when we go live during the afternoon with some good stuff as well. And it's pretty easy to leave comments, as we all know, on YouTube streams. Let's move on. Alan Quinlan is with us this morning to talk about the weekend's rugby. I guess, Alan, we should start with the drama, the dramatic, brilliant win for Munster. When you don't have your first choice out half, or your second choice out half maybe, I suspect, at this point, on the field to kick a winning penalty in the last seconds, it's always good to see somebody else step up and take that responsibility, right?
Yeah, it was unbelievable. I think everyone was shocked that the drama at the end, but I think overall it was a frustrating performance from Munster, and Glasgow were very good. They came to Thomond Park and they took their opportunities, and they looked very, very dangerous and threatening. And there's a frustration with Munster, I think. I think the chances and opportunities and the amount of work they have to do to get some of their scores, and I think, it's probably on the back of maybe a little bit of frustration from Gloucester the week before, although given that they got a very positive bonus point win, these results are good for them. They certainly wouldn't have enjoyed the drama at the end, but for Rory Scannell to step up there and have the confidence to take hold of the ball. Ian Keatley was on the field. I expected him to maybe try and kick it, but it was interesting to hear Johan van Grant speaking afterwards, saying that Rory Scannell was practicing long range kicks during the week, and Van Grant said to him, look, your time will come to get one, and it came pretty quickly on Saturday night. It was an incredible strike, in fairness, and that will do him individually the world of good as a player as well.
Yeah, I was going to ask, I didn't know that Rory Scannell was a kicker. I guess probably somewhere back in the recesses of his underage career he might have been, but does this suddenly change the conversation? Does having somebody be able to do that catapult you further along your career? Is he even thinking like that at this point?
Well, there's added advantage to being able to kick, but also having a left boot as well, and it gives an option of the wiper kick, as they call it in rugby. If the 10 can pass on to a 12, and he has that left foot option, cross-field kicks and stuff, and clearing their own line. So having a left-footed kicker, and we've seen that with Rob Kearney's ability, Zebo's ability as a full-back to give an option, particularly clearing out of your defence. So Rory Scannell has played fly half at underage. He's played before. He played a few games for Munster at fly half as well. So he has the ability to play there as well, and he's a good footballer. Someone who, has been in the Irish squad, has got opportunities, albeit, they've been limited. Joe Schmidt likes him, and he's close enough to look, the quality of the centres that are there ahead of him are obviously very high. But for him personally, when you have a moment like that in your career, it can certainly do wonders to lift your confidence a little bit, because we hear that a lot, Ger, about players on the fringes of making it in the big time or not, about confidence, self-belief within themselves. Can they step up? I found that myself when I was playing. When I was playing with Munster, I was in a comfortable environment. Then when you go up with Ireland, you're a little bit nervous maybe to express yourself. So it's something that I think will benefit Rory Scannell. It also shows a lot of balls, really, to be able to say, right, I'm going to have a crack at this. You can say it's a shot to nothing, but there's still added pressure there, and I think it was a fantastic strike, and it's a good option now that maybe to have that option going forward. It was a perfect strike, and like I said, Munster themselves will know that they've made a lot of mistakes at the weekend. The play is breaking down a little bit on them. Some guys got opportunities that maybe didn't take the opportunity. And that's not disrespecting Glasgow, a very good side, but I think there was a real frustration at the game the other night that they just clawed their way back into it. So you can take the character and the resilience out of it, but they just made hard work of it, which was frustrating to watch.
One last point about Scannell before we move on. He is, I think he's 24, he's 25 this December. So he's almost exactly the same age as Robbie Henshaw. But we've kind of become used to assuming that young Ireland players are going to come up through the system and they'll get game time early on, and if they haven't really kind of made the international team by the time they're 23, 24, they're not really going to make it. But actually, as you well know, there are loads of different routes to finding your best form and peaking, and Rory Scannell might be one of those players who peaks at 27 to 32, and so there's no reason for us not to kind of think that he could be part of that makeup of the Irish setup. And maybe not. Maybe I'm not kicking it down to the next World Cup cycle or anything like that. But you know, events like what happened at the weekend can be just that little sign along the road for him that he's going the right path and that he is capable of doing this.
Yeah, look, it's not ideally for him. He would have liked to have been in the Irish squad and got more caps and stuff like that. Munster have been in a transitional period. They haven't won in a while, so it's not. They're not dominating, winning trophies and stuff. He's part of that transition, and I think he's someone who's really been consistent the last couple of years with Munster. He'll know himself to step up to the next level and to take on Henshaw, Aki, Chris Farrell, Gary Ringrose, these guys. He's got to take his game to a different level, increase his level of performance, take control of it. He's very, very effective at carrying. He runs some good lines. His skill set is very, very, very good. He's passing distribution. And I've heard this on a number of occasions from players who played with him. His acceleration in the first kind of 10, 15, 20 metres is very, very quick. So he has the attributes to take the step up. You think just having that physical presence, that dominance, that bit of just a bit of a strut about him and delivering consistently, I think is the key for Rory. He's very highly thought of by his fellow players, and he's someone who, if you put him in an Irish team, or if he's playing playing for Munster, you're comfortable with that. I think sometimes it's just that consistency and maybe him dominating and being a bit more of a presence himself and taking control. So look, I think Saturday night will be massive for him. People might play it down and say, well, it's only a Pro 14 game and it's only a kick. But I think it is moments like that in sport can really accelerate a player's confidence and belief and their importance to a team.
Just one of the other things from Saturday night, Tony Ward is writing about it in the Irish Independent this morning, that the over-reliance of the TMO was kind of summed up by that Glasgow try that went upstairs. Like, what's your view on that? It seems to be a trend over the last couple of years that there is more of an over-reliance in the TMO, despite the fact that World Rugby, I think, have said that they're trying to pare back on the reliance.
Well, look, it's easy. There's an added pressure when you're one of the people who are making these decisions. So I think we can sometimes, when we watch it on monitors or screens, or if I'm working at a game, I can see, well, it's not a try or it is a try really quickly, and then there's a frustration. Why do they keep watching it over and over and over and over again? And maybe I'm in a more relaxed position, obviously, kind of to make that decision. People at home watching on TV are more relaxed to say, well, that's not a try, or it's a knock on, or there was some mistake there, and you make the decision quickly. But I think the issue is over watching it over and over and over again. I've seen some incidents in the game recently on where the touch judge, he's running up along the sideline. There's a confusion. The referee can't see the grounding. There might have been a knock on. There might have been a hand in there. In a maul, did he ground it? Do I need to go to the TMO? And I've seen some assistant referees go, try. It's a try. You don't need to go there. And we need to see more of that. I think there's an over-reliance, and it's a kind of a safety thing, and I can understand sometimes from the referee's point of view or the assistant referee that they're nervous. And did they just see a try, or did they not? Or if there's some shredded out? But it is becoming very frustrating. I would like to see more dominance from the referee to say, is it a try, is it not a try? Comes up on the screen, he watches it himself. And look, a lot of the times they're getting it right. I think it's just probably recently, and World Rugby have come out and said that it is something that they're looking to change, the over reliance on the TMO and maybe his contribution as regards what he's saying to the referee. Well, I think it's a try. I think ultimately the referee needs to start being a bit more dominant, put on the TMO footage. If there is major doubt there, then okay, ask the question. But ultimately the referee is the experienced international. He's the one that we can all see it sometimes, and then we see the debate going on.
I did want to ask about the post-match comments as well. Van Graan said that he's aware of the speculation linking him with a move back to South Africa. There's always going to be speculation, but that he's really only begun his journey at Munster and he's contracted to 2020 and he's going to stick around. It was good for everybody to hear that kind of said in as formal and as exact a manner as it was, because it definitely nailed the notion that he's in the running for the gig at this point.
We heard it before, though, didn't we, Ger? With Rassie Erasmus denied, that he was going to move. I think I was reading something yesterday that it's obviously a different type of move. Rassie Erasmus went to South Africa. I think there was, and I had heard this myself at the time, that there was massive political pressure in South Africa from government level to get Rassie Erasmus to come home and coach South Africa. And because they were in turmoil, rugby is such a passion of theirs. So they wanted one of their own back who was proving a huge success in Ireland. And that happened. It's obviously a little bit different with Johan van Graan, that, is it a sideways move? Is it a backwards move going to the Bulls? I don't know. They've been struggling for the last couple of seasons. His dad is on the rugby board in the Blue Bulls, Johan van Graan's dad. So that's not I'm sure if I was the dad, I'd be trying to get my son home as well, if he's in a position to come back and look after our hometown club or whatever. But I think it was good to hear Johan van Graan pretty clearly say it. I don't think the RFU will be too pleased if something like this happens again, because there is this 6-month clause situation, which, as we've seen before, can benefit the union as well. In the case of Kieran Keane last year, where they have to terminate the contract to give notice or want to coach out. It's not ideal the other way, where coaches are targeted. And I think it's very common that a lot of the likes of Leo Cullen, Stuart Lancaster, Felipe Cantapome, I can assure you'll be contacted and targeted in the next few years. Van Graan will be targeted probably by other clubs as well. Andy Friend with Connacht, it's part and parcel. People are looking into what the Irish provinces are doing and what they're achieving, and I think it's no surprise that there's interest, particularly when he's a South African as well. But I was glad he made the statement. Hopefully it's true and he sticks to his guns, because Rassie before, albeit there was massive pressure on him, said that he was staying, and then he departed, which you can understand the position he was in, but it was disappointing, because I still think he was doing an incredible job at that time with Munster, and he was a loss.
Going into the November internationals then, Quinlan, we may as well talk about them for a bit, coming up to the Italy game this weekend. Kind of a bit of half and half, I think is how I'm reading it, in terms of top quality players who are going over and first choice players who are staying at home. Seems to be a bit of a balance there. Rhys Ruddock set to captain Ireland, it looks like, on Saturday. So the land of opportunity, I think, from an Irish perspective on Saturday night.
Yeah, I think, look, the question is how important are these fixtures, and and what's the bigger picture here? The bigger picture is to develop some more names. I think 90 to 95% of this squad, the World Cup squad, are already in situ. You would think, bar injuries or an extreme loss of form. Will Addison's is someone who's in a position to challenge and try and get in the mix, and maybe not just challenge for the squad, but maybe be a starter, because he can play wing, full back, centre. So his versatility is something he was highly thought of before he came to Ulster. I think we've seen at the start of the season how good he can be. Tyke Byrne is someone else who kind of crops up. Can he force his way in to start for Ireland? And certainly he has the opportunity. So Niall Scannell as well, Sweetenham, the scrum half position, John Cooney, Luke McGrath. There's a number of people who are trying to force their way in and kind of get the attention of the coaches, in particular Joe So I think we've heard a lot about how they're monitored in training, how body language, the way they perform, how important training is, how efficient they are. So it's not just about the matches, it's about how they train and perform and stuff like that over the next couple of weeks. So it's a kind of a collective effort, even though there's 16 players left at home. And I tell you, I wouldn't like to be dropping my standards this week or being a bit blasé, because that's the kind of attitude and the standard Joe Schmidt has set, that, you know, every game is important, and I want to analyse how that player performs, how he handles the pressure, and how he brings something new to the table, and that's what he'll be looking at this week. But it is a mix of guys getting opportunities, but there's some fantastic players as well with experience, particularly up front.
Can I just ask you, now, having seen who's on the plane and who's in that team, or who's likely to make the team for the game against the Italians, who is your starting pack for the game against the All Blacks now?
It's more or less what started in Twickenham and probably the last test in Australia. I think it's Cian Healy. At the moment, it's Rory Best. I think Niall Scannell is going to put a fair bit of pressure there, and that's, Rory has to play well, and he'll be involved against Argentina next week. I wouldn't be too pleased if I was Rory Best not going. I would have liked to went to Chicago and played against Italy and played the next three. But look, I think Joe is looking at it, not going to play guys three matches on the trot, particularly the internationals. So I think it's Rory Best, Tyke Furlong, it's James Ryan, Devon Toner, it's O'Mahony, Stander, and the 7th spot is one that I think it's up for grabs, given that Dan Levy has had a few bangs and knocks this year, concussion. Van der Fleer got concussed. Sean O'Brien is back in the mix. It's hard to pick the 7th slot. I suspect if O'Brien is involved against Argentina next week and plays well, that he could force his way into starting. I'm not really sure about that one, Jared. It's a real tricky one. I think Mannion will start at scrum half. Sexton, Henshaw. It's difficult again. You're now getting into splitting hairs. It's Aki or Ringrose. Possibly Aki for the physicality, maybe, with Ringrose to come on. But it just depends what happens against Argentina. Again, splitting hairs on that one. Earls, Stockdale and Carney as it stands. And I think that's probably... I think you could pick that team yourself, Jared, because it kind of picks itself, doesn't it?
I just wonder if... so Ian Henderson isn't making it and Tyke Burns not making it.
Yeah, I think, look... I'm just going off guys who have delivered, because most recently, I think Henderson, of course, if someone could start with James Ryan and offer a different type of maybe physicality or ball playing ability to Devon Toner. So that again, there's a couple of guys. There's nothing between them. It could be Henderson. It could be James Ryan. I think I'm just picking the team that I think may be picked now. If you're picking a team now,
yeah,
that's going to be different in 2 weeks because
there'll be injuries.
Even aside from injuries, you'll have played Italy and you'll have played Argentina, and I think that's what Joe is trying to get to a place where certain number of guys will get opportunities against Italy and Argentina. Some will be involved in both, maybe on the bench and start one and on the bench for the second. So I think there's going to be a real mix in the 2 weeks, and then it's the night of the Argentina match. I think the coaches they won't be going out for too many beers that night. They'll start Saturday night and Sunday morning at getting a team and an idea of who they want starting against the All Blacks the following week. And obviously there's going to be some 50-50 calls. Like, you could easily start Levy, Van der Fleer, Sean O'Brien, either one of those three at 7, and you're getting top quality. Jack Conan has been playing well for Leinster. He's going to put a bit of pressure there. Rhys Ruddock is someone who could come off the bench. You just don't know what's going to happen, but there's certainly a huge number of options. Ty Byrne could be someone who could be an option as well, and but I don't know if he's going to start. I think he's a lot of work. He's given the other players have to play poorly or be injured at this stage. But there is time for Tadhg Beirne. I think he's the least inexperienced, obviously, because he hasn't been in the squad a huge amount. He only went to Australia for his first cap and stuff like that. So certainly there's a lot of depth there, particularly in that second row position, which was an issue a couple of years ago.
In terms of the second row, we hear so much about Toner being part of the brain of calling stuff. Like, how easy is it to, if he is the person whose job that is, how easy is it to leave him out of the team? And does the replacement automatically have to be able to do that? Or do you just make James Ryan that person now and say, okay, we think you're going to be first choice and the battle is to be your sidekick?
Well, I think, look, obviously Devin Toner is very, very astute now at calling. He has been for a number of years. They all would have learnt a lot off Paul O'Connell. He was kind of the ultimate line-out specialist as regards being your line-out captain and running the line-out. And every good team needs, someone who's dominant like that and who runs and decides where the ball is thrown. And you try and learn and you try and develop guys to do that position if he doesn't play. I remember a number of years ago, Donnchadh Ryan had to do it for Ireland when Paul pulled out before, I think it was a Scotland game a number of years ago. And he stepped up and started calling the lineouts for Ireland, then called them for Munster. And it's not an easy thing to do, Jared, because you kind of can be blowing at times. You're after getting up off the ground. You've got to run back 60 metres. You've got to start thinking, where is the opportunity here in the lineout? How important it is to win it, and where do we win it? So I think Toner has obviously learned a lot, very experienced now. Ian Henderson did it against England, and he's done it a few times since for Ireland when he's played for Ireland with James Ryan in recent times as well. So he's someone who's able to call the lineouts. James Ryan doesn't. I haven't seen him call lineouts yet, not for Ireland anyway. But it was a concern when Henderson. I wouldn't say a concern, but I was anxious about it because he's not the most vocal. We don't see him talking in huddles. We don't see him shouting and roaring or being involved with chatting to referees and stuff like that. And it is a tough job. So look, I think he's proved that he can do it now. Ian Henderson, he does it for Ulster as well. And I chatted to Rory Best about this before, so he's confident that Ian Henderson can do that job as well. But it's going to be interesting to see who starts there in a couple of weeks.
Yeah. One last question on this, right? I know we've laboured the point massively here, but it's just dawned on me, why the hell does it have to be a second row? Why can't Peter O'Mahony be that person?
Yeah, it can happen, yeah, for sure. I called a lot of lineouts before for Munster when I was there, particularly some of the shorter lineouts. So it does happen that back rows call lineouts as well. And Peter has called lineouts before for Munster as well and for Ireland. So, and obviously he's very, very good at what he does in the lineout.
Yeah.
So, yeah, option. And look, I think it's not just one guy who has to think about all this situation as he walks the lineout. There's an onus on every person who goes into a lineout, and this is the stuff that's been practiced. There was a time when I played, probably in my earlier days, where you didn't even think about the lineout. You waited till you got in there and you waited for the call, and then you got, oh, okay, am I involved in lifting here or am I involved in jumping? And if you're not, then you kind of, the tendency may be to switch off a little bit. But there is a pressure on every single person to even see the opportunity, even before the line-out guy makes the call, to be able to see, well, look, I think there's two places this ball is possibly going here because of the way the opposition are defending. So that's just the level of detail nowadays. Everybody knows, and there's a pressure on there to know your role in the line-out.
Good stuff, Alan. Thanks a million.
Pleasure.
Alan Quinlan giving us some thoughts this morning.
Interesting that he's going for Aki over Ringrose from the start. Doesn't necessarily pin his colour to the mast on who's the better player there, but definitely suggesting that Aki should start and Ringrose off the bench.
Is there ever a situation where he picks Aki at 12? There isn't, is there?
Like, you've got to pick your best player in your best position in midfield, and Henshaw's got to play at 12, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, attention on Ringrose all day long, right?
Like, I really didn't think that Aki would get the shout there, but it is interesting that he says that managing the game from 80 minutes, for the full 80 minutes, like you asked for specifically what the team would be for the All Blacks game, and perhaps having a bench full of finishers is how to beat the All Blacks. Of course, Joe Schmidt knows well how to beat the All Blacks. And to be fair, the finishers were pretty good that day in Soldier Field.
Yeah. I mean, you wouldn't have predicted that they were finishers, really.
No.
Like, you definitely didn't predict that so many of those players would get so much game time. Hendo always does a hell of a job, says Dingbat Dave on YouTube. Seems to play better in a green jersey than the white and red. Obviously playing with better players, tending to be a more go-forward ball in those games. Henderson is head and shoulders above Burns, says Dunleera on YouTube. I don't know if anybody is head and shoulders above Tadhg Beirne at the moment. Like, also what Byrne brings in terms of being able to steal the ball, get turnovers, win penalties, is just like as good as anybody in the game at the moment.
Yeah.
And to getting that into the Ireland team. Michael Curtin says, have to disagree, read TMOs. Refs are aware that if they get decisions wrong, particularly crucial ones, the pundits will rip them apart for not using the TMO. Damned if they do, damned if they don't.
Yeah, it is true. It's a good point that Queenie made there as well, though, about our view is a zero pressure scenario. It's like, oh, that was dotted down there. Yeah, easy call. Whereas realistically, we're like, oh, definitely when we're 85% sure. Whereas the referee's probably also 85% sure, but he needs to be 100% sure.
Because the thing about respect for referees in rugby is all well and good on the field, but in the post-match interviews, the head coaches don't have respect for referees. They rip them apart repeatedly, again and again and again and again and again and again. And the whole notion that rugby is a superior sport because that missive was missed by the head coaches who are like, that was a crappy decision, should have gone to TMO.
Yeah, well, maybe the respect culture comes from the fact that the players know that there is a 95% chance that this decision is going to be made correctly.
It definitely helps. Kieran Cunningham about the Jim McGuinness potential to be managing Derry. He says McGuinness would need the pro licence to manage in the Premier Division of the League of Ireland. A bit away from that yet. So
good point.
They've got around this before, haven't they? By having somebody who's the assistant having a pro licence, but I wonder how close he is. What stage of his managerial
I don't know
qualification process he's at the moment.
Jim McGuinness would be the last person I would suggest who would go into a job and feel he's underqualified. So I'd say he'll just bide his time, make sure he concludes that part of his training process, and then when he feels that he's fully ready and fully qualified and that there can't be that stick he used to beat him with, he'll hop into a job like that. It's a fascinating career. Like, really interesting to see what happens next in that Jim McGuinness path, because obviously he's taking quite an extended break out of sport at the moment.
I have two quick things I just want to do here. Brian Kerr talking about the form of Seamus Coleman at the moment after our live commentary match was, of course, Everton's defeat to Manchester United at Old Trafford on Sunday. So here's Brian Kerr in conversation with Nathan talking Seamus Coleman.
I know you were impressed with Everton as well and the quality of players they brought in, and Andre Gomez in midfield and that front four. But you mentioned Seamus Coleman there. He's back fit again. He should be back for the Republic of Ireland in Denmark next month. What was your view on his performance?
I thought he had a good game. He's a handful of Marshall, the confident looking Marshall today, and he wasn't getting a huge amount of help from Walcott on that side. At times there was 2 and 3 players breaking forward from that side of the pitch. Luke Shaw joining up obviously with Marshall. He got forward very well himself and made some really positive runs in both halves. In the first half, he picked out Sigurdsson with one cross. He got the header on goal. Picked out an earlier one, which just came back behind several Everton players, and Sigurdsson didn't get onto it. Made a surge through the middle of the field and linked up with Bernard. Second half, he had that chance. Was a good chance the match. Should have scored and would have got them back into the game a bit sooner. But I think all around a very positive performance for a player who's had a difficult couple of seasons with injury, and I think he sets a bit of a tone for the Everton team. There's a lot of respect you can see from the other players, but I think Gomez coming into the middle has given them real bit of quality in the centre position. There's lots of pace and invention in the attacking players they have now.
The Everton fans on Twitter don't agree with Brian Kerr. They were slaughtering Seamus Coleman for his performance, and frankly the Everton fans on Twitter are a bunch of dickheads. Like, he's just back from injury, a horrific injury, and he needs a little bit of time to get back to his full fitness, awareness, etc., and he's going to be grand.
Everton have been linked with Aaron Wan-Bissaka in the last week, so I wonder if that's just pure speculation and pure paper talk, or is there actually some sort of discontent or some view that Seamus Coleman from the hierarchy isn't quite back to his best or will not get back to his best. If they do sign Wan-Bissaka, that is a very worrying development for Coleman at Everton Football Club, but hopefully that's not the case. Like as you say there, I do think that there needs to just be a tad more patience there, and it's not like they can slaughter him based on a string of horrendous performances. He hasn't been horrendous, and he's like Kevin De Bruyne last night, for example, looked fairly sluggish for a man who's just getting back to the pace of things. Seamus Coleman was out for like 4 times the amount of Kevin De Bruyne's injury.
Tomas O'Shea, I want to read you this tweet. So, 7th player signed on the off-season from Ireland. It's a great opportunity for lads, and don't blame them one bit, but what a kick in the hole for clubs who've brought them through and given them everything. Counties too. The Aussies just pick and leave. Charge them. So, as far as I know, and I heard this, I can't remember where I heard this over the weekend, at one point Ty Kennelly had suggested that there would be a payment made from the AFL to the clubs or the county boards of the players who were leaving Ireland to go and play in the AFL. Some kind of compensation. But then Nicky Brennan had said that wasn't that wouldn't be in keeping with the amateur status, because like, if you're putting a value on the players, then suddenly the players are like, hang on, there's a value on me, I'm creating this value, how much do I get? I don't know if that was why they decided not to do it. This is on the back of Sligo's Red Oak Murphy, who's expected to sign for North Melbourne, which will be the 7th player that signed this year. So the trickle, après ça le déluge.
Yeah, it's I thought it's 6 players by my count here. So you've Red Oak Murphy, you've James Madden, obviously, you've Anton Tohill and Callum Brown, both from Derry, Stefan Akunbar from Kerry, and Cork's Mark Keane is the 6th. But anyway, so this will bring to 14. Colin Key's writing this morning of Irish players in the AFL, which is the largest we've ever had at any point in the history. And I guess it kind of comes from a rising athleticism in players, strength and conditioning. Maybe was lagging behind on an international level for a while, and it's very much caught up in the last couple of years. So the players are very much ready to step into a professional outfit, and it seems to be trending in the direction where something will need to happen in regards to compensation, or what the actual upside is of creating these players for the AFL, because while it's only 14 players and it's not a significant proportion, it might become a significant proportion. Once that number could tip over into 20, could tip over into 30 in the next decade. Like, really, there should be some sort of compensation. And you talk about what do the players get in return. Well, they get a big fat professional contracts. And
I know, but what you're doing is you're placing the monetary value aside besides playing for a GAA club. Like,
it does damage the amateur ethos, or it makes a mockery of it.
It explodes straight away. So what's the way out? Ban lads from getting passports until they're 26 and have no interest? Keep like local teams for local people? Is that it?
Just don't allow any cameras into the GAA grounds. No scouts. Just have a closed door policy to all club games at underage level.
Get rid of the inter-county game, and so therefore you'd be getting rid of development squads, and so therefore the best players would not be getting hothoused from the times they were 13, 14, 12, and so they would have no access to strength and conditioning, and all you have is the club game, and that's it, and it's just a club sport.
You just have a load of skinny, skillful 20-year-olds who are about to make it big in the inter-county scene.
Which doesn't exist.
That doesn't exist.
Yeah.
Wow, that would be a real price to pay for keeping 14 lads at home.
Well, if you're serious about this thing, you've got to, it's desperate times call for desperate measures.
Yeah, imagine that whole of not, like, I always wonder what it would be like to support one of those American teams who have their franchise taken away from them. Imagine if the GAA just got rid of the inter-county team and we didn't have any counties to support in the summer. That would be really depressing.
Well, there'd be great club matches week in, week out.
There's already great club matches.
Festival, but this would be like proper. All your best players would be playing for your clubs.
Yeah.
That's all they'd play. 35, 50, 70 club games a year.
Who would be the Dublin of that sort? Because let's face it, I mean, the club game is...
Some Crokes, obviously.
Well, there is that, like, but the fact that the club game is kind of parked at the end of an inter-county season, like the Dublin County Championship is obviously amazing, and it's probably the most competitive in the country in terms of relative depth and playing level, but it does come at the back of a strenuous enough inter-county season for a lot of those players.
Yeah.
So I would be interested to see what would happen if the club game was actually front and centre. Like, obviously some clubs have such a great system that they're able to...
Well, I mean, Crossmaglen this year...
Like Crossmaglen, classic example. Dr. Crokes, another great example. St. Vincent's for a couple of years there, absolutely. Kula in the hurling, without question. Like, fine-tuned in a perfect way to actually approach it. So...
Seriously though, there's no solution to this. Like, notwithstanding the completely made-up idea of getting rid of the inter-county scene, which, got out of hand pretty quickly there.
I started to weep a little bit there.
It's Tuesday. There is no solution. You just have to accept that this is going to happen, and wish them well and hope that at the end of it they come back, or if they only do 2 years, that you send the Gaelic football over with them and, you know, get the Irish people on the ground to play a bit of Gaelic football with them and just keep the skill set up.
Unless we do like a trade system. You take one of ours, we take one of yours. Just a load of random beach dudes playing for different counties around Ireland.
Oh, a bunch of 6'11" high fielders.
High fielders, well, probably wouldn't be able to
straight kickers.
Well, yeah, if they kick the ball straight, then straight away they get into the team, given the relative athleticism. Yeah, there is literally something like something would have to give. Basically, do you allow the amateur ethos to be corrupted?
Well, the AFL could make a central payment to the GAA, couldn't they?
But who gets that money?
The GAA, and they invest in coaches. Coaches.
For that county that they produce that player?
No, yeah, like sure, they're already giving, you know, maybe there's like an extra stipend at the end of the year, depending on the number of minutes played. Do they have to make it?
Kind of like a selling on fee. That's a Derry City often cash in on and Seamus Coleman.
That's pretty much all we've got time for. Sligo Rovers, that would have been.
Sligo Rovers, of course.
That's all from us this morning. Keep an eye on Off the Ball across the day. We're live again at 7 o'clock tonight. You can watch and subscribe to all the OTB channels to watch OTB AM every morning live from 7:45. YouTube.com/Off the Ball, Facebook.com/Off the Ball, and of course you can sign up to us on Twitter if you don't know how to do that. Twitter.com/Off the Ball and click follow on that one. Our podcast is also on Spotify now as well. Just search for OTB AM in the app. The 1 year anniversary of OTB AM tomorrow. Happy Halloween, folks. We're back tomorrow morning from 7:45. We'll see you then. Good luck.
OTB AM.
Thanks to Screwfix.ie. Championing the trade with a dedicated call centre.